The blood jungle wasn't a metaphor. It bled. The arena's foliage pulsed with a circulatory system, its vines thick with crimson sap that congealed where cut. Trees grew in fractal spirals, their bark obsidian-slick, photosynthesizing light from moons that pulsed like bruised eyes. A mist hung over the ground, bioluminescent and slightly acidic, and the entire biosphere exhaled in a low, guttural purr. Welcome to the 89th annual Camouflage Finals, held this cycle on Oxyprime's most lethal sanctuary moon, where the flora filed complaints when their kills were poached. Hovercams drifted like lazy hornets through the toxic canopy. From high above, the arena resembled a glowing ulcer on the face of a planet that already wanted to die. Spectators packed the stands like evolutionary mistakes. Tentacled, shelled, gelatinous, feathered, furred, hooved, or some glorious hybrid abomination of the aforementioned. One particularly vocal gastropod, wearing a monocle and sipping fermented neutrinos through its cloaca, exclaimed to no one in particular, "I give the human 30 seconds." Laughter, a universal noise of teeth and certainty, rippled through the crowd. Mira Elkins sat in the launch chamber, legs crossed, breathing slow and deliberate. Her gear was minimal, matte black exo-weave bodysuit, elbow and knee guards that looked more like museum relics than tech, a collapsible rifle no longer than her forearm, and paint streaked down her face in the old earth patterns, mud brown, moss green, bone white. She had not spoken since boarding the transport from the embassy. She'd nodded once to the translator drone and then ceased to acknowledge it altogether. There was a faint click from the walls. The air pressure changed, and the door in front of her hissed, like something old and tired finally giving up. The voice of the arena announcer, half organic and half sarcastic, boomed across the canopy. "Lords, ladies, and larval sacs, we begin our final round in the most prestigious event of the Galactic Stealth Games. Sponsored by Pax Rend Tactical Munitions. When you absolutely must murder the unseeable." Above, giant screens flickered to life. They showed split cams of the two competitors, Mira, silent and unreadable, and Gra Cull the Devourer, currently cracking his own knuckles like the air had offended him. Gra Cull stood 2.5 meters tall, exoskeletal plates layered like volcanic armor, each flex revealing biochemical musculature beneath. His eyes, 3 on one side, 2 on the other, shimmered in multiple spectra. He had killed 17 beings in the preliminaries, one of them accidentally while sneezing. He roared at the camera. The camera, feeling deeply uncomfortable, wobbled backward. The odds floated above the arena in glowing glyphs. Mira was currently a 712,000:1 underdog. Some species were betting their second-borns. One ambassador staked a moon. Back in the chamber, Mira tapped her thumb against the pulse point on her left glove. It blinked once. Calibrated. The announcer continued, oozing showmanship. For the uninitiated, by which we mean those with a survival instinct, the Camouflage Finals are not about brute force. They are about patience, precision, and predator-class stealth in the most hostile biomes this side of the Necrovoid. 2 enter. 1 leaves. The other is usually digested. A vine drooped from the ceiling, brushing Myra's shoulder. She didn't flinch. It recoiled as if stung. She stood. In the crowd, some cheered out of politeness, others because they believed watching a mammal get eviscerated would make their drinks taste better. Somewhere, a croc diplomat placed a small bet on Mira, less out of hope and more because he enjoyed rooting for inevitable tragedies. The platform beneath her shuddered, then rose. Light poured in, sudden and brutal. The jungle greeted her with a scream of wet, living noise, churs, clicks, hoots, and hisses overlapping like an orchestra composed entirely of nightmares. Trees breathed. Rocks pulsed. Even the shadows seemed conscious, twitching as she passed. Mira moved like ink dissolving in water, low, smooth, deliberate. She vanished within seconds. The crowd blinked. Several of them tapped at their augmented vision feeds. Nothing. "She cloaked," muttered a barbed alien in the luxury box. "Cute." "Humans use optical tech?" asked his companion, a floating orb of nervous plasma. "No," the barbed one sneered. "They use colors." An audible wave of disbelief passed through the stands. From the opposite end of the arena, Gra Cull stomped out, dragging a ceremonial blade longer than Myra's entire body. He scanned the tree line and laughed, a sound like bones breaking underwater. In the control tower, a panel of judges, one gaseous, one crystalline, and one currently undergoing mitosis, watched with smug anticipation. Her heart rate is absurdly stable, the crystalline one noted, voice chiming like silverware on porcelain. Drugged? Asked the gas cloud, briefly forming a question mark. No. Trained. The mitosis judge split in half and both halves shrugged. In the foliage, Mira crouched beneath a thermal-veined fern. Her breath came steady, her focus absolute. Around her, the jungle moved. She let it. Listen first. Then move. She could hear Jiarekul's footsteps, heavy, arrogant, wide apart. Confident. She catalogued his gait. He was used to dominating space. Good. That meant he'd be slow to adapt when it vanished. Overhead, the drone swept by, catching only rustling leaves. The jungle, bored of waiting, intervened. A thick vine lashed toward Jiarekul's chest. He caught it mid-air and bit through it. Red sap sprayed across his torso. He roared again, then began marking trees with claw swipes, scent and signal. A common tactic. Also idiotic. Mira began to circle. She passed under a branch thick with acidic moss. Stepped over a pit trap someone else had once triggered. Slid behind a mushroom the size of a grav bike and just as foul-smelling. She watched as Jiarekul entered the clearing. He stood still for a moment, trying to scent the air. His nostrils flared. Then he stopped. He turned his head, slowly. Too slowly. In the stands, a hush fell. Even the 14 torsoed insect lords stopped mid-toast. "Wait," whispered the announcer. "Does he see her?" Jiarekul took a step forward. Another. Then he swung his blade in a wide arc, uselessly. Trees shattered. Mushrooms exploded. Sap gushed like arterial spray. Nothing. No human. Only silence. Mira was already gone. The game had begun 20 minutes ago. But for her, the fight started the moment the crowd laughed. In a nearby hollow, she checked her rifle. It wasn't flashy. No glowing coils. No plasma hissing. Just a simple kinetic weapon with a silencer tuned to pitch outside most auditory ranges. Old Earth tech, reliable, efficient, forgotten by most. She'd call her shot soon. But not yet. Not until she knew everything. Wind direction. Ambient temperature. Jiarekul's breath rate. His mood. His level of dehydration. The exact mineral content of the mud on his boots. She needed him disoriented. Not dead. A low tremor rippled through the ground. Jiarekul stomping again. Angrier now. Shouting in war tongues. Daring her to face him. Threatening her ancestors. Suggesting things about mammals that were biologically improbable. She smiled. Barely. In the VIP box, a merchant prince muttered, "Where the hell is she?" The orb being replied, "That's the point." Below, Mira slid beneath the roots of an inverted tree. Its leaves curled inwards, as if whispering secrets. She listened to her heartbeat. Once every 3 seconds. She slowed it further. Discipline honed in jungles far less theatrical than this one. Jiarekul roared again. She'd let him. Let him paint himself in noise and movement. Let him become the flare in the dark. Let him bleed tension into the roots until even the plants wanted him dead. Then, and only then, would she strike. She exhaled once. No words. No prayers. And vanished deeper into the blood jungle. Jiarekul couldn't smell her, and that bothered him. He had won wars by scent alone, discerning fear from 8 meters out, tracking cloaked infiltrators through ammonia swamps, once even detecting a political assassination by the faint odor of guilt. But now, as he lumbered through the bloodthirsty vines of the jungle, the only thing his nasal glands detected was chlorophyll rage and the bitter tang of his own rising frustration. It was a perfect arena. Designed to challenge the best predators in the galaxy. Not one tree grew straight. Each had evolved some vengeful defense, thorns like obsidian fangs, bark that released paralytic gas, leaves that mimicked screams when brushed. Even the rocks had personality disorders. And somewhere inside all that, a mammal was humiliating him. He crushed a crawling vine underfoot and barked a command in his native tongue, a sound that translated roughly to, "Come out and be properly slaughtered." The jungle answered with a mocking rustle. From a perch high above, Mira watched him through a gap in the dense canopy, motionless, heart steady. Her pulse didn't spike. Her breathing didn't quicken. She had spent too long in real jungles, ones that didn't care for spectacle or narration. Earth's jungles didn't roar when you walked into them. They just waited. She crouched, rifle cradled in her arms, camouflaged beneath layers of mud, crushed bioluminescent moss and instinct. There was a discipline to it. Not hiding, blending. Like you were meant to be there, like the world was built around your silhouette. Her eyes stayed on Jericho, who had just roared again and was now tearing apart a venomous shrub, perhaps to assert dominance over the foliage. He was off-center. Too much motion. Too much rage. She'd seen it before. 4 years ago, on a wet deployment along the Peru-Colombia border, Mira had been dropped with 2 other operatives into a rainforest basin. Hostiles had dug in, cloaked themselves with tech, thermal blockers, EM dampeners, jungle-mimic skin suits. It didn't matter. Mira waited. The jungle whispered everything. She remembered lying in a nest of roots for 16 hours, unmoving, while ants used her arm like a superhighway. She never scratched. One shot, when it came, landed just beneath a throat guard, pure reflex wrapped in calculation. She hadn't missed since. Back in the present, Jericho smashed a boulder with the side of his blade, scattering predatory beetles into the air. Mira noted the velocity. He wasn't just posturing. He was searching. Clumsily. Desperately. He hated the silence. Good. She shifted slightly, barely enough to realign her angle, and paused as a butterfly-shaped organism landed on her wrist. It was bright blue, its wings transparent and humming like a distant engine. She waited. When it drifted away, she resumed. The jungle observed. It had once been called the Korzavi Thicket, back before the blood upgrades and the spectator platforms and the industrial biogenetics. It didn't remember names. It remembered heat signatures. It remembered cries. It remembered the way death tasted when it was patient. Mira respected that. She didn't rush it. She let the jungle cradle her. Jericho bellowed again and swung wide at something that hadn't moved. The crowd reacted with a mixture of cheers and confusion. Several viewers began cycling through spectrums, trying to find her. One smug cephalopod claimed to spot a blur in Quadrant 3. It was a branch. On the diplomatic balcony, representatives from 17 species leaned in. A few were now suspicious. The humans had done something. A trick. A cheat. Surely. Camouflage couldn't be that effective. Not against someone like Jericho. She's exploiting the terrain, one said. She is the terrain, muttered another. Jericho paused again. His instincts screamed at him. She was nearby. He knew it. But he couldn't hear her. Couldn't smell her. Couldn't taste the air the way he normally could when prey tried to stifle fear. She wasn't scared. That unsettled him most of all. He dropped low into a hunter's stance, narrowing his steps. Slower now. Listening. Trying to force the jungle to speak. But the jungle, at the moment, had a favorite. Mira let him get close. 20 meters. 15. She marked every angle, calculated wind cross, gauged light refraction from a distant fungus bloom. She even considered the minute magnetic fluctuations from Jericho's blade. All of it fed into her subconscious like a silent choir. She didn't process it consciously. That would have slowed her down. Her rifle remained folded. No need yet. Let him sweat. He stumbled onto a pheromone trap she'd laid earlier, a discarded leaf soaked in predator musk. His vision flashed alerts, warning him of hostile proximity. He lunged at the wrong direction and triggered a snare of razor grass. It whipped his armor, shredding a decorative shoulder plate. He screamed in fury. She didn't blink. Another step, and he almost stepped on her mark, the one she'd made by altering the acidity of a patch of moss, causing it to release heat the same as her own body. He spun, fired his plasma sidearm, burned a crater into the forest floor, then waited, breathing hard. Mira watched the steam rise. He was angry enough now, edges fraying. She backed up slowly, gliding through the underbrush, adjusting her angle. On the big screens, the cameras tried desperately to find her. Commentary became confused. Ah, the human seems to have evaporated, or become one with the foliage. Perhaps she is the foliage. Oh wait, that's a stick. No, that's her. No, it is a stick. Gra Kull roared a challenge into the air. Come out and fight, coward. The forest didn't answer, but something near him chirped. A mocking echo. He struck at it and missed. Again. Mira moved to flank him, then paused. She could end it here. One shot. She had the angle, the cover, the patience. But she didn't fire. He wasn't broken yet. She wanted him aware. So she picked up a stone and tossed it behind him. Durkle spun, swung, slashed the air, and hit nothing. But he turned just fast enough to catch a glint. A glimmer. The barest shimmer of movement. Not enough to target, but enough to terrify. He froze. Sweat, if it could be called that, gathered along his thoracic ridges. His heart thudded. Something alien to his species crept into his chest. He didn't recognize it at first. He'd only ever induced it in others. It tasted like shrinking. Fear. For the first time, Gra Kull was prey. He dropped into a crouch and activated full sensory override. Neural noise cancellation. Infrared overlay. Biolock motion mapping. Nothing. The forest offered nothing. Because Mira was already moving again, repositioning. Her scent was masked beneath layers of biolaminate mud. Her shape hidden by manipulated plant angles. She wore shadow like a religion. She had trained for this. Not for a show. Not for glory. For survival. For clarity. For the kind of silence that made gods whisper. She saw his shoulder dip. His breath tighten. The very moment he realized he'd lost. Not in a blaze of combat. Not in some last stand of steel and fire. No. He lost in the slow, creeping certainty that something smaller, quieter, and infinitely more patient had him in a vice he couldn't see. A shiver passed through the jungle. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath. She touched her rifle. Gra Kull turned in a circle, senses peaking, instincts howling. He was in the center of a kill box he couldn't define. He roared one last time, less a threat, more a plea to the crowd, to the sky, to anything that would listen. The crowd was silent now. Not out of boredom. Out of awe. One shot hadn't even been fired, and the winner was already decided. But Mira didn't squeeze the trigger. Not yet. She waited one heartbeat longer. Because what the jungle remembered was patience. Gra Kull's hearts thundered like war drums muffled beneath layers of stone, each beat vibrating through the armored ridges of his torso and bleeding tremors into the soil. The blood jungle shivered at the frequency, vines retracting the way small animals retreat from imminent lightning. His breathing snarled in staggered bursts. Discipline had abandoned him, replaced by the raw chemical storm the hunting priests of his species called the Red Certainty. It was supposed to be a gift, an endocrine cascade that sharpened senses and hardened chitin until it rang under impact like temple bells. Yet in this place every stimulant felt like ballast, dragging him into deeper, thicker silence. Mira tracked that silence from 40 paces, hidden in the negative space between two gargantuan fungal trunks whose caps formed an inverted canyon of purple biolight. Her rifle hung weightless in her grip, muzzle angled downward to keep dew from pooling in the flash suppressor. She could almost taste the trinary adrenaline cocktail saturating Gra Kull's bloodstream. On the last glacial exhale she catalogued a rise in ketone discharge, panic translating into metabolic burn. Good. Panic made vectors. The predator equation, her old instructor Sergeant Kaloum insisted, had 3 variables: perception, decision, execution. Control any two and victory became a statistical inevitability. The jungle was controlling perception for her, bending sound and scent. She had already seized decision. Execution, then, was merely arithmetic. Gra Cull staggered left, knuckles carving trenches through luminescent undergrowth. The dents filled instantly with photosynthetic blood, turning the ground into a mosaic of glowing punctuation marks. He paused, nostrils flaring, pupils dilating into turquoise predatory discs. He clicked a mandible switch, forcing his onboard HUD to ditch spectrum overlays and return to raw optic feed. Maybe the technology was lying. Maybe only primal vision could pierce whatever witchcraft cloaked the human. He blinked 4 times. Nothing surfaced except a rising blur of heat haze thrown by his own metabolism. Mira eased sideways, sinking each microscopic step with the rustle of fern fronds swaying on a thermal draft. Picking a firing position was less about distance than about narrative. The shot had to tell a story the galaxy would believe. If she killed him from a kilometer out, pundits would chalk it up to luck. If she engaged at arm's length, they would call it suicide that went improbably right. But a single, deliberate round delivered from within spitting distance? That would rewrite betting algorithms across 17 star systems. She settled behind a gnarled root arch and rested the rifle across the living wood. The stock molded to her shoulder like a memory. Wind. Negligible. Humidity. Oppressive. Barometric pressure. Dropping. Storm incubating above canopy. She checked ammunition. 1 solid core ferrous slug, mass shifted to remain subsonic until 15 centimeters before contact, then accelerate via microcapacitive burst. Old school meets sneaky physics. Gra Cull crouched and plunged 2 claw tips into the dirt. He lifted a handful of soil to a tasting cavity near his jawline and ran chemical analysis. Human epidermal excretions were uniquely fatty. The jungle should have absorbed microscopic traces. Yet the sample tasted only of iron oxide, rotted cellulose, and the faint iodine whisper of the planet's recycled atmosphere. He growled, low and frightened. The crowd sensed momentum shift like sharks sensing hemoglobin. Their noise dimmed to a collective inhale. Holofeed zoomed on Gra Cull's carapace as condensation beaded along stress fractures Mira had scored earlier with her decoy dart. Commentators traded uncertain glances. The human had not appeared, and yet the champion's aura looked visibly thinned, as if knives of silence had sliced through it. Gra Cull rammed a fist into a tree trunk, splitting it lengthwise. Maggots poured out like sizzling rice. They clung to his arm until their enzyme glands tasted foreign protein, then dissolved in panic. He brushed them away and barked a curse. His transmitter relayed the insult onto every public channel. The human hides behind ghosts and toys. Show your face, brittle-boned coward. Mira considered replying. Words could fracture morale better than bullets. But transmitting would ping location. She let the insult die in unshared bandwidth. Instead she selected an old trick, give the quarry a puzzle they couldn't ignore. She reached into her thigh pouch, retrieved a reflective shard of Gra Cull's own shattered shoulder plate she had collected minutes earlier, and flicked it into a shaft of moonlight. The fragment caught a beam and pulsed a brief, brilliant flare directly into his line of sight. He spun, weapon raised. The flare winked out. He advanced 3 steps and saw, himself, grafted onto a leafy silhouette shaped by broken moonlight angles. For half a heartbeat he misread the echo as threat, swung, and beheaded a harmless shrub. While his blade cleaved cellulose, Mira glided to a flanking ridge. The jungle thundered anew as distant storm clouds ruptured. Fat droplets fell, hitting heated leaves with a hiss. Raindrops swarmed sensors, masking micro-movements. Mira smiled. Water was her element. Gra Cull, bred in volcanic warrens, despised moisture. Steam enveloped him, further warping thermal readouts. She flipped her rifle selector to dampen muzzle flash. Her breathing slowed another fraction. Rain drummed on her hood but never touched skin. She ran mental calculus. Distance 19 meters, downward angle 4 degrees, compensating for gravitational anomaly that slightly increased freefall acceleration by 2% compared to Earth norm. Dirkle stomped through a puddle. Hydroacoustic ripples betrayed ankle instability. Wounded? Possibly nerve damage from razor grass. Good variable. Execution. She exhaled half a liter of air, the perfect sniper's breath. Finger nested on trigger pad. A screech erupted from the canopy. A winged predator, part bat, part scalpel, plummeted toward Gra Cull, drawn by his kinetic flailing. Reflexively he sliced it midair. Blood rained. The sudden motion shifted his center mass, revealing an unarmored membrane beneath his left armpit where plating articulated. A green icon blinked on Myra's reticle. Bullseye. Her rifle coughed, quiet as a sigh. The slug traveled subsonic, invisible to standard ballistic tracers, riding wake turbulence from the storm's downdraft. At 15 centimeters it leapt to hypersonic, shattering sound only inside Gra Cull's personal bubble. Impact, a wet, metallic thunk buried deep. The slug cratered through membrane, ricocheted off rib plating, and lodged near a secondary heart. Not lethal. Calculated. Gra Cull froze. His mind needed a full 2 seconds to report pain because the projectile's auto-lubricated casing delayed tissue reaction. He looked down, confusion wider than his pupils spread. Then agony detonated. He roared, a noise of tectonic gears snapping. Lightning flashed overhead and painted the scene in stark monochrome. Titan wounded, jungle exalted, human unseen. Mira shifted again, already erasing ballistic origin. If Gra Cull attempted blind retaliation, he would waste energy hemorrhaging. Factoring blood viscosity, she predicted he had 4, maybe 5 minutes of peak function remaining. Less if panic accelerated pulse. She leveraged fallen creepers to climb a low rise and settle into an observation crook carved by termites. From there she watched math take effect. Blood loss equals weakness. Weakness equals mistakes. Mistakes equal openings. The equation balanced elegantly. Gra Cull's audio feed reached the stands. The roar cracked loudspeakers. Some spectators cheered, others recoiled. Medical odds recalibrated. The number beside Myra's name shrank exponentially. Bookmakers scrambled to lock bets. Gra Cull tore open a stimulant cartridge and injected its contents directly into the wound. The fluid cauterized tissue, but also flooded his system with rage compounds. He staggered, shrieked, then launched himself into a berserker charge. Trees splintered, soil geysered. The path carved behind him glowed, sap ignited by friction. Mira calculated vectors of pursuit. Straight-line velocity outran her sprint capacity, but unpredictability always superseded speed. She let him thunder past her previous position, then ghosted along a parallel vector, using thunder to mask sprint steps. Within seconds, she trailed 2 o'clock on his flank. The rainforest thickened into a cathedral of twisting trunks. Biolamps embedded by arena engineers cast shifting labyrinthine shadows that confused even sophisticated optics. Gra Cull barreled through the maze, sensors flaring false contacts. His wounded joint misfired. He clipped a pillar root, stumbled, regained posture. He howled again, voice dopplering through corridors of bark. Mira searched for a choke point. She needed him contained for the finish. Up ahead the terrain sloped into a natural basin, ringed by carnivorous pitcher plants tall as gunships. Each plant secreted scent that mimicked injured prey to lure scavengers. Gra Cull's open wound would override their mimicry. They would sense real blood and lean inward, narrowing the corridor organically. Perfect. She accelerated, reaching basin rim seconds before him, perched unseen above path. Rain intensified, streaming off leaves like molten glass. Below, the pitcher plants stirred, their mouths yawning. Gra Cull thundered into the funnel. Acidic nectar misted, stinging his eyes. He slowed instinctively. That hesitation allowed adrenal drain. His limbs began tremoring. He pivoted in tight circles, scanning canopy for the ghost. Mira aligned sight picture. She considered lethal ends, brainstem, spinal nexus, dual hearts. But her mission brief filed by Earth's diplomatic corps wanted spectacle, not massacre. Demonstrate capability, it had read, and destabilize predictive hierarchies. A kill would accomplish the latter but squander the former. Better to break him publicly, leave him breathing, force the galaxy to remember humility. She toggled to concussive round, chambered. Wind dropped, storm spent. Silence returned, sharp as razors. Gra Cull sensed stillness and raised his blade, hilt trembling. "Show yourself," he cried in 7 languages at once, translator overmodulating with desperation. Mira obliged precisely halfway. She stepped from foliage onto a broad limb 5 meters overhead, cloak peeling back like curtain unveiling Act 3. The spotlight of 4 moons broke through clouds and gilded her silhouette. Mud dripped from her gear in slow rivulets. Rifle leveled at his helmet. Gasps rippled stadium-wide. A million eyes locked on the small shadow now dictating fate. Giaricol looked up, neck straining, expression contorted between dread and disbelief. She was right there, close enough that he could smell wet metal and human salt. Yet every sensor still read 0. The predator equation ended here. She spoke for the first time. Checkmate. Then she pulled trigger number 2. The concussive round did not pierce. It erupted against cranial plating and converted kinetic energy into directed shockwave. Giaricol's onboard HUD shattered from inside. Sensory implants overloaded. Equilibrium gyros died. His massive frame turned mannequin stiff, and he toppled backward into the pitcher plants. Carnivorous lips snapped shut around him, forming a living coffin. His armor prevented digestion, but vacuums of flesh-sapping enzymes siphoned what little strength remained. He could thrash but not rise. Mira slung rifle, vaulted down, and landed lightly at basin edge. She watched tendrils coil over Giaricol's limbs. He was conscious, eyes frantic, mouth gnashing. But fight was gone, only panic remained. She leaned close enough for microphones. Predators adapt. Legends learn. Decide which you'd rather be. Her words tunneled through his ringing skull. Understanding flickered behind pain. She straightened, backed away, and signaled arena medics by tapping wristband 3 times. Above, the jungle lights surged, spotlighting her lone figure amid carnivorous orchestra. Crowd erupted, some cheering, some shrieking outrage that a duel ended without a corpse. Wagers dissolved into confetti of lost fortunes. Mira turned from cameras, melting again into vines. But before she vanished, she glanced once over shoulder at Giaricol's immobilized form and allowed herself a sliver of respect. Titans fell hardest, yet sometimes they rose wiser. Balance, after all, demanded it. She disappeared just as sirens blared, heralding officials racing to secure the basin. Up in the stands, ambassadors activated crisis protocols. A single human had rewritten the algorithm. Emergency drones zipped overhead, projecting hazard grids while biosurgeons rappelled on carbon threads to extricate the battered champion. In the executive skybox, the Rlati admiral who had wagered his flagship on Giaricol's victory tore his promise scroll in half, ink scattering like shattered galaxies. Reporters gushed into open channels, hunting metaphors grand enough for the upset. Somewhere in the panicked comm stream, a quiet human diplomat whispered to Earth's high command that Phase 1 of Operation Miravine had succeeded flawlessly, beyond prediction. And she wasn't finished yet. The medics arrived too late for their dignity. Giaricol was still conscious, barely. He floated mid-air, suspended in a translucent containment orb filled with regenerative gel, his armor peeled back like fruit skin to expose the glistening aftermath of humiliation. The round Mira had fired hadn't killed him. It hadn't needed to. In the eyes of his people, what mattered was not the flesh, but the narrative. And the story now etched across every broadcast circuit in the galaxy read, unseen, unmatched, unanswered. The crowd hadn't stopped screaming. Some wailed in outrage, demanding recounts, blood, even war reparations. Others, the diplomats, the tacticians, the species who lived long enough to fear math, remained quiet. They were the ones who saw it for what it was, not a victory, but a message. And Mira Elkins walked alone through the exit tunnel, brushing moss from her forearm, her eyes unreadable. She passed under the carved obsidian arch that marked the edge of the blood jungle and entered the decontamination corridor. A mist sprayed her from ankle to shoulder, dissolving spores, scent markers, and a memory or two. A security drone flitted past, hesitated as if about to ask something, then thought better of it. The announcer, once jubilant, now sounded like a man narrating his own funeral. And there she goes, ladies and reproductive units. Mira Elkins of Earth. The underdog with no sponsors, no support, no flashy tech. Just one bullet, one jungle, and one very public reckoning. A feed captured her silhouette, small against the towering arena gates, rifle slung over her back like a farmer walking home at dusk. Galactic cameras zoomed in on her expression, hunting for triumph, grief, vengeance. They found none. In the judge's skybox, Counselor Drovex, whose face was composed of concentric ripples and whose mood changed the color of nearby furniture, turned pale violet. "We underestimated them," it whispered. "You think?" snarled its counterpart, a carnivorous cloud who had bet its third mate on GRA Cull's flawless record. Drovex watched the replay again. Not the shot itself, but the slow, deliberate emergence from the trees. That one half-step into the moonlight. That pause. That look. She wasn't proving she could win, Drovex muttered. She was proving she could have won at any moment. The broadcast played it again. 73 billion viewers across the spiral arms watched Mira appear from the jungle. Watched her hesitate. Watched her choose mercy. No one ever feared Earth's compassion before. In the underground media chamber, human diplomats were already being swarmed. Questions poured in from across the coalition. Was she genetically modified? What was her cloaking tech called? Was she a symbol or a warning? One reporter leaned forward, eyes wild. Are there more like her? The diplomat, a thin woman in a suit that cost less than the hoverchair she arrived in, smiled without mirth. We prefer not to advertise. Another paused, confusion writ large. But why camouflage? Why that, when you have railguns and mechs? She answered softly, because if you can't find the enemy, you can't bribe them, can't predict them, can't prepare for them. And Earth has never needed to look big. Just invisible until it matters. Above, in the post-match press dome, GRA Cull lay curled inside his medical orb, listening. He couldn't stop replaying it. Not the pain, not the fall. The moment before. The shadow with the eyes that said, "I saw you coming a week ago." The voice that whispered checkmate with no emotion at all. The mercy. No one had ever shown him mercy. No one had ever spared him to make a point. And now, in the eyes of his own people, he wasn't defeated, he was permitted. The thought made his stomach clench. Not from shame, but from realization. Because what Mira had done was not destroy a legend. She had made one. Just not the one he thought he was. Back on Earth, 100,000 miles above the pale blue sky, the Tactical Reconnaissance Division of Human Space Command was receiving data packets from Oxer Prime. And in a secure chamber known only as Room 19, 10 men and women watched the footage in total silence. At the end of the replay, one man cleared his throat. "Well," he said, "that's our case made." No one disagreed. One woman, gray-haired, military-bearing, a single cybernetic eye, spoke next. She used only one round. "By design," said the analyst. "Minimal risk. Maximal broadcast value." Someone else chuckled. "One shot, one empire." "That'll headline well." "Already trending," muttered the youngest among them, typing rapidly. GalacticNet just put her face on 7 billboards orbiting Ven K9. Caption reads, "When you hear nothing, pray it's not her." The room sat with that for a moment. Then the commander stood. "Initiate Phase 2. And tell Elkins she did well." A beat. "She'll ignore it." "Of course she will." On the ship back to Earth, if it could be called a ship, more a gravity-stable folding pocket moving through stitched space, Mira sat alone. She had been offered a seat with the diplomatic team. She declined. Offered celebratory drinks. Declined again. In her hands was a slip of laminated bark, taken from the jungle, near where she'd lain for hours. She turned it slowly between her fingers, watching the light catch the veins. She didn't feel victorious. She felt exact. Everything had moved as expected. The weight of footsteps. The hesitation of eyes. The miscalculation that always accompanied arrogance. But what lingered wasn't Jirakul's roar. It was the jungle's quiet. How it had accepted her. How it had remembered her. Not because she belonged, but because she never asked it to notice. Camouflage, after all, was less about hiding and more about ceasing to interrupt. Mira closed her eyes. Let the hum of the ship wash over her like a second rain. And somewhere in her bones, she counted breaths. 3 in, 3 out. Nothing else needed saying. In the following days, treaties were revised. Military funding shifted. Some species canceled war games involving Earth. Others began them. The Galactic Academy added a course, Primitive Tactics and Psychological Supremacy, the Earth Doctrine. Students filed in, nervous. Their first assignment, define fear. And in every corner of the galaxy, in war rooms and senate chambers, in barracks and bunkers, a phrase was spoken like a prayer or a curse. They laughed at Earth's camouflage. They weren't laughing now.